Tonight, a gunman opens fire outside a Jewish museum in Washington, killing a young couple and igniting an international row. Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lishchinsky were days from getting engaged. Sarah's father says her death was one of his worst fears. The suspected gunman shouted "Free Palestine" as he was arrested and has posted online criticizing Israel's actions in Gaza.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice.
As Israel accuses the leaders of France, Canada, and the UK of emboldening the forces of terror, we'll hear the response from the British government. In Gaza, some aid, but not enough, reaches desperate communities as doctors say they are running out of baby formula. Also coming up, after the Oval Office ambush, we hear from two South Africans, a white farmer and a presidential advisor, about Donald Trump's claims of genocide. And the last in our series of reports from Haiti, Stuart Ramsey goes inside the only hospital in a gang-controlled section of the capital. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening and welcome to the programme. You are on the wrong side of history. That's what Israel's Prime Minister told the leaders of the UK, France and Canada tonight. A public accusation made after a young Jewish couple was shot dead by a man who shouted "Free Palestine" as he was arrested. This was Benjamin Netanyahu's response.
Yaron and Sarah weren't the victims of a random crime. The terrorist who cruelly gunned them down did so for one reason and one reason alone. He wanted to kill Jews. And as he was taken away, he chanted, "Free Palestine."
He specifically linked criticism by world leaders of his country's war in Gaza to the killings in Washington. It's all part of a highly charged, divisive debate about Palestinian statehood and Israel's right to defend itself. These scenes of desperation and destruction that we see each day, that helplessness that so many people feel, the perceived inaction or otherwise of Western governments, all of that is rippling through societies all across the world. And that brings me back to one young couple who will now never get married, Yaron and Sarah. Friends say they were both committed to peace, yet they died in the most violent way. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has our first report.
There's no doubt, there's fear.
Most poignant layer to all this. They were diplomats Yaron Lishchinsky and his fiancée-to-be Sarah Milgram. They represented Israel abroad. And the tributes now being paid to them are reflective of the better world they sought. Sarah had an unwavering belief in dialogue, peace and equality, according to the charity she worked with. They were shot at close range as they attended an event for young diplomats in Washington's Jewish Museum. The suspected gunman, identified as 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez from Chicago, was restrained and detained moments later, but with a chant which hints at his motivation.
Free Palestine!
And with that, the other layers of this tragedy were exposed. An attack on the victims' community, their religion, their government. And from the top of that government, not a beat before he called what he saw.
As he was taken away, he chanted, "Free Palestine." This is exactly the same chant we heard on October 7th. On that day, thousands of terrorists stormed into Israel from Gaza. For these neo-Nazis, Free Palestine is just today's version of Heil Hitler. They don't want a Palestinian state. They want to destroy the Jewish state. I could never understand how this simple truth evades the leaders of France, Britain, Canada, and others. They're now proposing to establish a Palestinian state and reward these murderers with the ultimate prize. You're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
Netanyahu's representative in Washington, for whom the two victims worked, was here to pay tribute to two brilliant people, but also to echo his prime minister's view, exposing the thorniest layer, the accusation that it is Israel's policies in Gaza which are increasing these anti-Semitic attacks.
Anti-Semitism is on the rise, not because of Israel's responding, but because of countries like France, who under this circumstance, now, tomorrow, plan to propose the unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state.
How would you suggest that foreign governments who are concerned, deeply concerned about the Israeli government's methods in Gaza, how should they be critical without, inciting violence, as you seem to be suggesting?
First of all, nobody is more concerned about conducting warfare than we are. We're the ones who are losing our soldiers. And if we could conduct a war without collateral damage, that would be wonderful. Do you know of any wars where there's no collateral damage?
Just for a few moments. Yes.
Donald Trump's Attorney General has made herself visibly part of all this. Clearly moved, she pledged to throw all the weight of American justice at the suspect and had this on the threat levels.
I can tell you security has been increased here as of last night. Our U.S. Marshals are working hand in hand to make sure the embassy is safe, our ambassador is safe. And again, please know, everything we know now, he acted alone. From everything we know now, this is an ongoing investigation.
Beyond here, just blocks away, the suspected gunman's appearance in court will be his first of many. The politics will swirl. The pain here will endure. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
Well, we heard that strongly worded statement from the Israeli Prime Minister. Other ministers made similar points on social media. Just have a listen to how the government here responded.
My thoughts go out to the victims and their families. It's a shocking incident, and I know that it won't have just impacted on the families of the two victims, but also for the wider Jewish community, both in America, here at home in the UK, and in Israel and elsewhere. And I do recognise the pain that would have caused and the fear that will have caused in the community. I think it's important to separate that from the words and the statements from the Prime Minister, the Canadian and the French leaders, because what they are trying to do is to call upon the Israeli government to cease its action, cease the expansion of its action in Gaza in order to prevent the humanitarian catastrophe that we are seeing unfold there.
Well, that was the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmoud, there, describing the shooting as shocking and insisting countries have the right to criticise Israel's actions in Gaza. Well, we'll be live in Washington with our correspondent Ashish Joshi in a moment. But first, let's go straight to our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who joins us live from Jerusalem. And Alex, obviously this is a tragic day in Israel as well. This young couple were heading in that direction. And we heard there from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who sounds as defiant as ever.
Yeah, I mean, this attack, these remarks, extraordinary, blistering, excoriating on traditional Western allies. And what's so extraordinary about them is that he seems to be suggesting that there is a causal link between criticism of Israel, opprobrium of Israel and its policies in Gaza, and physical threats. He's linking it effectively, what Prime Minister Starmer, Prime Minister Carney and President Macron have said, with the murders that took place in Washington. But I think we also need a little bit of context when it comes to these remarks. Israel, remember, is becoming internationally increasingly isolated. Many critics of Benjamin Netanyahu will see this as an act of deflection. What he is trying to say is that criticism of Israel ultimately leads down the route to moral failure because it sides with Israel's enemies. What he's also saying is that you can't really effectively criticize Israel, and by doing so, he's changing the narrative, talking about self-defense for the Jewish state, trying to really divert the international gaze from the growing the growing problems, humanitarian catastrophe within Gaza. I think the other thing to remember, of course, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu is also a man who's facing growing criticism here at home as well. Now, this may be red meat to his base, but there are large amounts of protests being held almost on a daily basis against his government's policies. But I think the singular thing that perhaps it underlines most is that this deepening rift over Gaza, diplomatically between Israel and some of its key allies, is getting worse tonight, not better.
Yeah, indeed. Let's bring in Ashish. And Ashish, everything that Alex is talking about in terms of how this war in Gaza is being prosecuted by Israel is playing out on the streets of Washington with 2 diplomats gunned down.
The difficulty for any critics of Israel's actions in Gaza at the moment is that they can't be seen to be anti-Semitic. We've heard some very strong language from President Trump just minutes after these cold-blooded murders on this street just behind me, in this building just behind me at the Jewish Museum. And President Trump clearly making a very strong line saying we will not stand for hatred or anti-Semitism in any form. And that sentiment has been echoed by other leaders in this country, including the Attorney General. This is a hate crime and this is a murder. And there has been no support for the actions of this alleged gunman, the suspect who's being questioned now by the FBI. He has a really unremarkable history. He is an American who's born and raised in Chicago. He was a donor to Joe Biden's election campaign. And when you look at his 8-page essay posted on his X account, which has been verified by Sky News, it's a blistering attack on Israel's policy in the Middle East, in Gaza, and the violence that's being carried out by the Israeli army. That's according to Rodriguez, the 30-year-old suspect. So Americans will be thinking now, how do they voice their concerns? How do they show their dissatisfaction with what's happening in the Middle East, but not be associated with cold-blooded murders like this one? It's a very difficult one for the Americans now. At the moment, they're saying that this is a one-off attack carried out by a single person. They are investigating it, but they're trying to reassure the American communities here that this was a one-off attack and that there is not a wider group of people who support the actions that we saw here last night.
Ashish, Alex, thank you both very much for that update. Now, as Ashish was saying there, the man suspected of carrying out the shooting is due to appear in court. He has been identified as 31-year-old Elias Rodriguez. In the minutes immediately after he opened fire, one eyewitness recalls hearing him say that he did it for Gaza. Ashish has this report.
This is Elias Rodriguez, under arrest moments after shooting dead 2 Israeli embassy workers. The FBI has already begun a deep dive investigation into Rodriguez's background to try and understand the motives behind these killings. And at Sky, we've verified an X account belonging to Rodriguez, where he posted an 8-page essay trying to justify his actions. The atrocities committed by the Israelis against Palestine defy description and defy quantification. Instead of reading descriptions, mostly we watch them unfold on video, sometimes live. After a few months of rapidly mounting death tolls, Israel had obliterated the capacity to even continue counting the dead. He goes on to say, public opinion has shifted against the genocidal apartheid state, and the American government has simply shrugged. They'll do without public opinion then. Criminalize it where they can, suffocate it with bland reassurances that they're doing all they can to restrain Israel where it cannot criminalize protest outright. He signs off with, I love you, Mom, Dad, baby sis, the rest of my familia, including you, and here the name is obscured. He ends with Free Palestine, the same slogan he shouted during his arrest. Israel denies accusations of genocide. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected a recent UN report investigating its actions in Gaza as biased and anti-Semitic.
The evil of anti-Semitism must be eradicated from our society. I spoke to the Attorney General this morning. The Department of Justice will be prosecuting the perpetrator responsible for this to the fullest extent of the law. Hatred has no place in the United States of America.
So what more do we know about the attacker? Rodriguez was born and raised in Chicago, his home and neighborhood now the focus of the FBI's investigation. He works as an administrator at the American Osteopathic Information Association. In a statement, they say they're shocked and saddened and ready to cooperate. Federal Election Commission records show that 5 years ago, he donated $500 to Joe Biden's presidential campaign. Police were quick to assure Americans Rodriguez acted alone, and there is no further immediate threat connected to this attack. They can't know that for sure, of course, but American investigators have promised to bring those responsible to justice. Ashish Joshi, Sky News, Washington.
Well, joining me now is Aylat Razin, a friend of Sarah Milgram. She's also an expert on international law and human rights. Aylat, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. And I'm sorry for your loss. This is obviously a massive tragedy. You were friends with Sarah. Just tell us a little bit more about her.
Sarah was a young, bright person, professional diplomat. She did amazing work in the embassy to promote peace, to promote solidarity, to promote the true understanding of what is happening in Israel, and bring victims of the terror attacks and the hostages and the hostage families' voices to stakeholders, to policy promoters. And she's gone. It's a beautiful soul that is now was brutally murdered in the name of anti-Semitism, and it's heartbreaking. I see her picture, and it's devastating.
Yeah, how is this being felt by the Israeli community and by Jewish people that you may have been speaking to around the globe?
This came as no surprise. This is not a sporadic, murder, outrage. It's part of a long series of acts and expressions of violence all over the world, and also in the U.S., aimed at Jews, aimed at Israelis, and not enough is being done to stop. And I'll say further, the next murder is just waiting to happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And usually these kind of situations are inspiring for others. And if leaders and governments and academia and activists and organizations do not align together and say, this is not appropriate, this is not acceptable, this is not, in the name of politically correct, becomes part of our norms, threatening a community, then it will continue.
Is there you talked there about the next potential attack being just round the corner. Is there now going to be an attempt to heighten security around these sorts of museums, facilities, embassies? I mean, embassies are obviously secure, but is there a sense that globally that security will now be ramped up?
It is already at high level. Now it's at the top level from the reports I've been getting, but it's further than that. There's a ripple effect to these kinds of attacks. I saw that there is a strong recommendation not to go to synagogue as traditionally you're supposed to on Friday and Saturday, not to have gatherings of Jewish people in their prayer house. That is the new norm. That is okay. That is something the public seems to accept and to live with, the price you have to pay. And it's beyond my comprehension how this has come to be. Show me another ethnic or religious group that needs to hide their identity, that they are recommended not to speak their native language in public, to hide their religious a kippah or the Star of David. Where else is this kind of behavior accepted, or demand is accepted to, minimalize yourself in the public area, not to become a target. And this has become the new norm.
What do you think now needs to happen for these sorts of attacks not to happen again?
First of all, it needs to be recognized as what it is, a terror attack, an anti-Semitic attack. And I've been interviewed a lot today, and sometimes I get a few instances, I got this question on, do you think it has something to do with the ongoing war in Gaza? And I say this is beyond my comprehension, how it is possible to put the murder of these two beautiful young people in context of a war. That person, the perpetrator, stood outside a Jewish museum waiting, going back and forth, waiting for an expected Jewish crowd to come out of an event he knew that was happening, and shot to the crowd. He didn't know Yaron is Israeli. He didn't know they work in the embassy. He was looking to hunt down, there's not a nicer or more delicate word, to hunt Jewish people. And this is not in Europe of 1930s or 1940s. This is in the heart of the US Capitol, Washington, American citizen, beautiful Sarah. It's just unbearable. And again, not enough is being done.
Eilat, we're really grateful for your time. Eilat Razin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, after a 3-month-long aid blockade, the first food and humanitarian assistance reached some communities in Gaza today. Flour to make bread, baby formula, nutritional supplements, and sugar arrived at bakeries, soup kitchens and hospitals. But charities and doctors are warning of an impending catastrophe if more supplies aren't distributed quickly. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has this report.
Maya is 2 years old. She is starving and hugging herself in pain. Her mother puts a top on her tiny body. It is agony for her. She is one of the young victims of the blockade on Gaza.
Most stocks of food and baby formula have almost run out. Many are already depleted. The situation is catastrophic for pregnant women and children.
Some aid is now starting to get into Gaza and to the millions who need it. Only a little and not yet enough, but it is something. The United Nations said that 90 truckloads of aid has now been processed, including flour, sugar and food. Mina is 9 years old. The last time she had any bread, she says, was almost 2 months ago.
The border is closed and flour is unbelievably expensive. 2,000 to 3,000 shekels. We don't have that kind of money. No one can work anymore, so we can't eat.
As soon as food is available, there is a panicked scramble to get to the front and get some before it runs out. Fail, and the whole family might go without anything at all. The meal today was a bowl of plain rice.
Unbelievable prices. I'm one of the many here who can't afford anything. Not a tomato, not a cucumber, chili pepper. I just can't buy it. The prices in the market are just unbelievable. I've been at this soup kitchen since 8 a.m. waiting for a plate of rice or some cooked beans. My children sometimes go to bed without dinner. Sometimes they don't have breakfast. They wait for me to come back with something from the soup kitchen for lunch. If I couldn't get anything, then they won't have lunch.
These bags of flour have just arrived in Gaza. They'll be used to make thousands of loaves of pita bread. It is the first time this bakery's been working in months. The bread will immediately go to those most in need.
What we brought is definitely not enough, but we hope that the borders will remain open and we'll be able to bring more aid into Gaza. 2.2 million people of Gaza, almost everyone depends on humanitarian aid.
Ceasefire talks in Qatar have completely broken down. Benjamin Netanyahu is now demanding the relocation of Gazans to another country as one of his conditions to end the war. The aid blockade might be over. Gaza is now getting some food to eat. But peace, well, that remains a very distant hope. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Let's turn now to Nasser Hospital. It operates one of Gaza's last functioning intensive care units. A team of British surgeons have been working there for several weeks. Dr. Victoria Rose is among them and has been posting video diaries as bombs and missiles fall. Have a look.
It's nearly 7 o'clock in the morning and we've been up since about 5:30 because the bombing's been really bad this morning. We've been watching jets screech past our heads and then drop bombs on the neighbouring vicinity. I'm standing on the balcony of the EMT accommodation and a really large bomb has just gone off not far to the east of us, and the ambulances here have just readied themselves to go off and pick up who knows how many casualties. So I think we've got a lot of work heading our way.
Well, Dr. Rose joins me now from Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. Thank you so much, Dr. Rose, for joining us here on the programme. Your video diaries have been crucial in documenting what's going on there because, of course, we journalists can't enter Gaza. So your work is critical in helping audiences, helping people understand. But just help us better understand right now the situation at Nasser Hospital because, of course, it's one of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza. Just tell us where it's at right now.
Well, the situation here is pretty dire because we found out on Tuesday that we are not far from the active fighting zone. In fact, on Tuesday, the evacuation order came out and we were following it on the IDF website. And we are 1 square away, which is about 4 streets or 1.5 kilometres. And so on Tuesday, we actually lost quite a few of our staff because they had to go and evacuate their families because they were living in that area of East Khan Yunis. But what's really worrying for us is obviously the closer the IDF gets, the more likely we are to have to evacuate Nasser. And we are the last remaining full functioning facility in the south that has ICU capability. Although we are surrounded by some amazing field hospitals, we have UK Med and ICRC and MSF Belgium not far from us. And we also have the Jordanian hospital and the Kuwait hospital. They're all field hospitals, so they're essentially tents. They can't take on the complex surgery that we're doing here. They have no ICU facilities and they have no generated oxygen. Nasser at the moment has 2 adult ITUs, each housing 12 patients. Then it has an overflow ITU, and then it has a pediatric ITU. So if we get evacuated, no one can take those patients. And if we get evacuated, all of those facilities together cannot cope with the number of patients that Nasser has. So we are really, really concerned about the prospect of lots and lots of people dying if the IDF get any closer to us.
And Dr. Rose, does that feel, because you are now very close to the active fighting area, does that now feel imminent? I mean, you have said you've lost colleagues who have had to evacuate, who have lived in that area. But does that now feel like any day now, you could be asked to evacuate?
Well, looking at the way that the ground offensive is being run, the plan is for the IDF to come further in from the east towards the Saladin Road. And if that happens, that cuts us off from Al-Aqsa, which is the next nearest hospital to us. And it's estimated that about the way that they're progressing, we've probably got 4 or 5 days before we're looking at being in an area that the IDF will be advancing into.
Dr. Rose, your skills are crucial in this active war zone, plastic surgeon. Just talk us through the kind of scenarios and situations you've had to deal with over the course of the last week or so?
Well, we've had a lot of mass casualties in on this trip, so we've been non-stop busy. I started at 8 o'clock this morning, and I was worried that I wouldn't finish in time to make the interview. It's 11:30 here, and I didn't get back until about 11:15. So it's really long days. I'm doing about 11 cases a day now. They are all bomb injuries. So the bulk of what we're seeing is either a burn, which is probably 50% of them, and those are major sort of heat burns from the explosion. Lots of them in children. Half of Gaza's population is children. So lots of really small children with huge burns, all in the resuscitation level of sort of 30 to 40%. Burns that are often unsurvivable in the Western world. And then the rest of the injuries that we're seeing are basically due to when a bomb goes off, whatever is around you gets whipped up in the explosion. So that may be masonry, bits of car, whatever. That then gets ejected at quite a high velocity and will hit a civilian. And if it hits you in the head, abdomen or chest, it normally kills you. If it hits you in a limb, it's possibly survivable. And those are the people that are being brought to us. Some of them are already missing parts of their limbs when they get to us. So hands blown off, feet blown off. Feet blown off is a very common injury here. And they may well have other injuries, broken bones, skin loss, and that's what we're dealing with. We're trying to get the wounds clean enough to close. And obviously, this is going on for people that are living in tents. So the whole environment is very dirty. The wounds are very, very dirty.
Dr. Rose, in terms of, when this conflict ends, I mean, how do you see the picture of Gaza given the scale of the injuries, the death, the destruction, the casualties, everything that you're talking about?
Well, I think we're at that critical point where we have a moment where we could change this if the war stopped now and we got aid into Gaza. The main thing at the moment is to look at the humanitarian crisis that this has created. We really need to get more food in. The trucks that got in today just aren't enough. We haven't had any medical aid to us since the 2nd of March either. So we're running out of all sorts of consumables. We've run out of scalpel blades. We're running out of betadine. We've also had a restriction on the number of aid workers that can get in. And I think once that lifts and people can get in and start helping, then we do have a chance to certainly rebuild the healthcare sector here.
Dr. Rose, we're so grateful for your time, and I know you've had an incredibly long day, so fitting us in right at the end to tell the world what's happening is crucial. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, you'll remember the explosive scenes in the Oval Office last night, a carefully prepared ambush by a US president who is convinced a white genocide is being carried out in South Africa. Donald Trump showed a montage of images and displayed a series of news reports. Well, over the past 24 hours, our data and forensics team have been sifting through his evidence and the actual data. So are white South African farmers being disproportionately killed? Well, according to South African police, 225 people were killed on farms between April 2020 to March 2024. Many of the victims, 101, were current or former workers living on farms. And though the data does not specify ethnicity, they are most likely to be black. 53 of the victims were farmers who are more likely to be white. So what about those images we saw played out in the White House? Well, Donald Trump described this man as a government official. He is Julius Malema, an opposition leader and considered by many to be a fringe figure. His party has 6% of seats in parliament. So they are not, as Trump claimed, officials and are not considered a mainstream party. Ramaphosa repeatedly stressed that EFF is a small minority. Trump also held up articles saying they show white farmers being targeted, their burial sites, and that some were even burnt. That first article in the previous clip showed body bags, which were featured on a February 2025 YouTube video of Red Cross workers in the Democratic Republic of Congo, nothing to do with South Africa. Another video played by the US president showed lines of white crosses alongside a road, claiming it is a burial site for white farmers, but there is no indication that this is true. The white crosses are believed to be a memorial for farmers, black and white, who were murdered. Satellite imagery from 2023 shows the crosses are no longer there. White crosses have been used as a symbol of commemoration for the murder of farmers in South Africa for years, like in the Witcreus Monument. Our Africa correspondent Yusra El-Begir has been speaking to farmers and has this report.
It's a quiet, sunny morning in South Africa after an ambush of its president in America. But at a glance, you'd think there was nothing going on. It's strange to think that idyllic, small, white-owned South African farms like this one are ground zero for such an explosive meeting thousands of miles away in the Oval Office. But what happens here and how it's represented is fueling President Trump's claims of a white genocide. Interesting to know. When we last spoke to Vani, he was happy white farmers were being offered protection by the US.
We had a lot of break-ins.
After the meeting at the Oval Office, he's elated. What did you think of the White House meeting?
Americans will call it a whipping. I will say immediately, we are not in genocide at this stage. We are suffering from crime, and they are targeting the white people, but because they're a little bit more affluent than other people.
But a much more deliberate case of persecution is being alleged by President Trump.
Death, death, death. Horrible death.
Who presented discredited sources as evidence of a white genocide in South Africa. A case refuted by facts and one simple statement from its president.
There is just no genocide in South Africa.
But there are issues Afrikaners say they need addressed.
Instead of going into a genocide or not genocide fight, just accept farm murders is a serious issue, and there are tangible steps that we can take. And those steps we have put in our proposal that we are going to discuss with the ANC, and I think that is the way to go.
Ultimately, the statistics don't support a case of mass killing.
If you look at the official statistics from the police, they already show that a year we have murders that are over 30,000. But when you're thinking about the farming community as a part of that, it's a small share, around 0.1%.
Once again, South Africa's bitter racial politics is being laid bare for the world to see. 30 years after apartheid ended, and only 5 months after Trump was inaugurated. Yusra El-Begir, Sky News, South Africa.
Well, we put our findings about the images used by Donald Trump to the White House, and a spokesperson disputed what they called the characterization of the president's evidence regarding the persecution of Afrikaners as inaccurate. Now, this week, we've been bringing you a series of special reports from Haiti, a Caribbean nation teetering on the brink as its capital is terrorized by gang violence. Tonight, we go inside a hospital in Port-au-Prince where malnutrition and cholera are rife and children are most affected. Well, the UN says violence between the warring gangs has displaced more than 1 million people. The fighting is blamed for the deaths of at least 5,600 people just last year. Almost 6 million Haitians are going hungry and need food assistance, unsure where their next meal will come from. Well, Port-au-Prince has also lost most of its medical facilities, either closed or unable to function. Our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, went to the only working hospital left in an area called Cité Soleil, which means Sun City. And a warning, his report contains pictures of malnourished children, which you may find distressing.
It's known as the birthplace of the gangs of Port-au-Prince. This section of town has been violent and dangerous for decades. It's called Cité Soleil, Sun City. Armed gang members check us out, but we're with a known driver. We're allowed to pass. Civil society doesn't function here. The gangs control everything and attack anything, even hospitals. The Fontaine Hospital, built in the slums of Cité Soleil, is the only medical facility still functioning. Without it, the people here would have no access to doctors or medicine. Founded 32 years ago by Jose Ulysse, it's a charity. In the cholera ward, he told me the increasing gang violence across Port-au-Prince and the chaos it's causing means people are herding into displacement camps. Cholera outbreaks are getting worse. For these cholera patients, their only hope of survival is here.
Cholera is always present, but there's a time when it's more. Lately, because of all the people in the displacement camps, there is a great deal of promiscuity and rape, and we have an increase in cases.
In the clinic, they give food to parents to feed their babies. These children are all malnourished. The giveaway sign, as always, their distended tummies. Poverty and insecurity combine to cause this. Like cholera, malnutrition is getting worse. These little children are all badly malnourished. We've also seen cholera in the hospital. What the doctors say is they are absolutely all linked to the gang violence here in Port-au-Prince. Basically, the malnutrition is because the parents can't go to work, they can't earn money, it's too dangerous outside, they can't afford to buy food, and the kids end up in places like this. The cholera, again, it's here all the time, but when the insecurity is high and people are living close together, it spreads everywhere. The sexual violence is on the increase. There's many, many problems, but they all have one common denominator, and that's the crime gangs. The medics and hospital workers risk their lives every day crossing the gang territories to care for their patients. And they are some of the most incredibly vulnerable. If you weren't here, how bad would it be for the community?
Just imagine. Just imagine. There isn't any place where they can go. Everyone comes here. Normally, the poorest people in the country come here.
Attacks on hospitals and staff working in the toughest areas of Port-au-Prince have become common. Threats to Médecins Sans Frontières staff has forced them to suspend work at 2 facilities. In crowded displacement camps, mobile teams do their best to help tens of thousands who are effectively living rough. It means that what is left of the government-run health service, like Le Pays Hospital, are simply overwhelmed by demand. Well, this is a fully functioning hospital, but it is absolutely stretched to capacity, mainly because 70% of medical facilities in Port-au-Prince have been closed down because of the gangs. They've been attacked, they've been burnt, and sometimes the staff in these facilities have been threatened, so they've had to move on. So it means we're now in the only functioning major hospital in the capital of the country. This epidemic of gang violence that's crushing the light out of Port-au-Prince is a virus that's spreading through society, a virus that seems to have no cure. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Port-au-Prince.
Let's just bring you some breaking news now about that shooting that took place in Washington. Elias Rodriguez has been charged with the murder of foreign officials, causing the death of a person through the use of a firearm, discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence and first-degree murder. So Elias Rodriguez now charged for the murder overnight of the 2 diplomats working for the Israeli embassy, Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lischinski, in Washington, D.C. Now, let's go back to our story in Port-au-Prince tonight. And Benavar Vasseur, the head of mission with MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, joins us live from Haiti. Thank you so much, Benavar, for joining us here on the programme. MSF was targeted a couple of months ago, and they've now suspended all of their activity and operation for a couple of months in Haiti. Just give us a sense of what happened and how you got to this point.
We didn't close all our facilities in Port-au-Prince. We only closed 2 of them. We are still currently, and sorry for contradicting your reporter, Stuart Ramsey, but we are running 1 facility in Cité Soleil, an emergency center, another health center in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn, which is an area of Cité Soleil. And we also run a trauma care facility in Tabar, which is a commune of Port-au-Prince. A burn unit center in the same area. We have a sexual violence center close by, and in another area of Port-au-Prince. We also run mobile clinics in different displaced people camps.
And just, I mean, we saw there in Stuart's report the impact on the health facilities, the level of violence that's escalating, the impact on civilians, especially women and children. Just talk us through some of the things that you're dealing with.
Well, Stuart showed our facility in Port-au-Prince city center, the emergency center of Turgeau. It was closed when he framed the facility, and it is still closed today because we had to evacuate the facility as we were becoming just at the front line of extremely violent fights in between gangs, Haitian National Police, and vigilante brigades. We were running under stray bullets, and while evacuating this hospital, we got shot at in between this emergency center and our trauma center in Carrefour, which is a suburb of Port-au-Prince on the west part.
Beneva, I mean, you know, these are healthcare workers, you know, medical professionals who are trying to conduct life-saving work, and yet they're coming under attack. What are you now calling for to ensure their protection? Because these are your colleagues, you yourself, MSF has been attacked, and your work is so crucial given the level of violence in Haiti.
As you're saying, but it has been 3 years that I've been working in Port-au-Prince. It's probably the 7th or 8th time that we are closing our facilities because we are currently under attack. We keep calling for the respect of the medical mission, but it seems no one is hearing us. So Stuart was mentioning the Hôpital de la Paix, which is with our facility in Tabar, the only trauma center actually currently working in Port-au-Prince. Ours are the only free ones. Even in the Ministry of Health run facilities, patients have to pay because the system is totally stretched and all facilities are extremely overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, yeah. Well, we're really grateful, Benoit Vassou, for your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Well, let's go to Turkey now, where in March protests exploded against President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The trigger was the arrest of Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, who'd emerged as a rising popular rival to Erdogan. But the demonstrations grew into a wider movement against a president who critics say has become increasingly authoritarian. Well, in 2016, President Erdogan survived an attempted military coup. In response, his government embarked on a large-scale campaign of arrests, not just in the army, but thousands of perceived plotters, including teachers and journalists. In 2017, he narrowly won a referendum that transformed Turkey into an executive presidential system, and in elections the following year, Erdogan officially became the first president with executive powers. Fast forward to March of this year, and the mass protests after Erdogan's rival, Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, and many other opposition figures were detained on corruption and other charges, which they deny. The president insists the judiciary is independent and none of the arrests were politically motivated. It's against that backdrop that the author Elif Shafak creates her characters. She joins me live now. Elif, it's so wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
When you hear sort of that timeline of the situation in Turkey, it must sort of remind you of the realities that you lived under for a certain period of time and what you went through when we talk about journalists, teachers being accused as some kind of, working against the state.
Well, Turkey is a beautiful, beautiful country with beautiful people, but it's so complex, and there's no doubt in my mind that it needs and deserves democracy. As you pointed out recently, the arrest of the very popular and much loved mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, is unacceptable. And this is not the way forward. So there are so many people in Turkey, as you've seen, the young people on the streets, women protesting. Maybe we don't hear their voices, but they do exist. I always feel more hopeful when I think about the people, but when I look at the politics and the politicians and how the country has been going backwards, at first gradually, but then with a bewildering speed. So when I look at that, I feel much more demoralized.
And of course, you write these extraordinary books trying to bring some of the characters to life that you have met or seen. I remember you once talked about, I think it was a prostitute walking through the streets of Istanbul, in the early hours of the morning, and bringing some of these characters to life so that the world can better understand actually the depth of Turkish culture and its traditions in this kind of framework of, a state that is sort of being run by someone who's trying to have an iron fist over the country.
I moved to the UK about 16 years ago now, but my heart, of course, we do not forget our motherland. So I do think about the people a lot. And I think in my stories, I try to also give voice to silences and people who are silenced or pushed to the periphery. So the Istanbul that I write about is perhaps not the touristic Istanbul that we hear about in glossy magazines, but the underbelly of the society. And it's very important for me to also underline that these women that I write about, they're not victims, they're also very resilient, They have amazing solidarity among themselves. So to try to give life, to try to give voice to the forgotten, to the erased, to the silenced, is something that I find very important.
Yeah, and I mean, your recent novel, There Are Rivers in the Sky, it follows three main characters, which looks at some of these issues of their life and their character and what they're experiencing. But I just wonder if we, think about then the wider political situation in Turkey, watching a society become what it is, how do you feel about that now when you look at a Turkey, what it was, what it has become for all its faults and flaws? And do you look at other parts of the world and see that similar trajectory?
Indeed, I very much do. And I think it is an illusion in our minds. We tend to think that time is always linear and tomorrow is going to be more developed than yesterday, but there's no such guarantee. There's no guarantee that the arc of history will bend towards justice, right? And those of us who are old enough, we will remember in late 1990s, early 2000s, there was this assumption that some parts of the world were solid lands. And in those solid lands, you did not have to worry about the future of human rights, women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights, or freedom of speech, because all of those had been achieved. It was in those liquid lands like Turkey that you had to worry about, for instance, democracy or women's rights. But fast forward, I think we've entered a new age in which we understand that there is no such thing as solid lands versus liquid lands. We're all going through liquid times. So what I'm trying to say is what is happening in one country can also happen elsewhere. And I think countries can go backwards. Generations can make the mistakes that their grandparents had already made. And us women, I think, need to be much more careful and passionate about democracy, because when and if a country goes backwards and slides into more patriarchy, ultranationalism, religious fundamentalism, and loss of democracy in general, the very first rights that will be taken away will be always and always women's rights.
Absolutely. I always see that in my reporting as well, that it's the women that disappear first. We have about a minute left, Elif, but I guess the point you're trying to make is no one has a monopoly on human rights, women's rights, democracy, no matter where you think you're from.
Absolutely. And we're seeing book bans, book removals in very different different parts of the world. So my point is we need to become more engaged citizens, think about our democracies. It breaks my heart that the word diversity is being used as a negative term. I value diversity. I do come from a country that has almost never appreciated its diversity. And by losing that, I think we've lost a lot. So let us care more about democracy, diversity, pluralism, coexistence. But I also believe for all of that, we need the arts, we need literature. And we cannot treat art and literature as luxuries that can be discarded. In a divided age, I really think stories bring us together, but silences keep us apart.
And just briefly, are you working on anything right now?
I am working little by little. I'm also doing lots of book festivals. I love cultural events, literary festivals. Those are the places where we can slow down, hear each other. We can agree or disagree, but we have time for each other. So I make a distinction between information, knowledge, and wisdom. And I think we need to focus more on knowledge and wisdom. That's what I want to do in my next book.
Elif, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
So grateful.
Thank you. Well, a busy programme, a busy week. Thanks so much for joining us. The News at 10 will have all the latest headlines, including that update from Washington, D.C. with the charging of Elias Rodriguez. Good night. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, it's